Have you been using these monsters wrong all along? This week, I look at 5 monsters that you may not be using to their fullest potential. Hello players and GMs, I am Reese and welcome to another video by Jetpack7. Before we get started, I just want to wish you all a very happy new year. I hope you all had a wonderful time ringing in the new year, and I'm looking greatly forward to what 2021 has in store for us. As always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Your support of this channel makes a huge difference to us, even if it feels like nothing to you, so thank you again to everyone who has already done all that stuff. It really, truly does mean the world. So, I've been seeing a lot of posts on Facebook groups and whatnot about different encounters they've run their players through, as well as some of my friends telling me about games they're playing in, and one constant theme I've noticed is that GMs have been massively underutilizing the monsters that they throw at their players. Now, I think it mostly comes from them just finding cool monsters in the monster manual and loosely justifying their presence in the narrative so that their players can fight them. This week, I wanted to go over 4 of the most legendary creatures in the monster manual that I feel like aren't being utilized to their fullest potential. Let me start off by saying that if you just want your players to fight this stuff, that's fine. There's not necessarily any need for tons of thought to be put into crafting a narrative and story for these monsters. If your players just enjoy carving through legendary creatures like little kids with a machete in a cornfield, that is perfectly understandable. Trust me, I grew up playing Dynasty Warriors, so I'm always down for a good hack and slash session. That said, I found that oftentimes when a monster is just tossed in the middle of a party without much forethought, it cheapens the experience. Many of these monsters I'm about to discuss have ridiculously high potential for an incredible narrative, or at least multiple sessions worth of gameplay that would result in not only more rewarding combat, but also more challenging combat. If your goal is to challenge your players, then putting some more thought into these stories and mechanics of these monsters will do the job in spades, rather than just increasing the number that you throw at them. Plus, a few of them could have prolonged presence in your campaign, which makes it particularly satisfying to finally defeat. To start things off, I'm going to touch on a monster I discussed in a previous video, the Hobgoblin. The Hobgoblin is so often associated with its less organized and less powerful cousin, the Goblin. Goblins are unorganized, barbaric, and neutral aligned. They abuse their power, but mostly get subjugated by any creature powerful enough to keep them under control. And while they are in the same family of goblinoids, they couldn't be more different than the Hobgoblin. Hobgoblins are often the ones subjugating the goblins. They are a militaristic group. They are organized, they form legions, and they are lawfully aligned. One of their most prominent features is the overwhelming need to prove themselves worthy in the eyes of their fellow soldiers and rivals. They are extremely prideful, so they cannot allow themselves to show any signs of weakness. Their separate legions will fight, but within the legions they are deathly loyal, so take advantage of all of this when running them in your campaigns. If your players are hearing about a legion of hobgoblins, that should spell some serious trouble for any of the nearby cities or villages. I personally love the imagery of the characters cresting a hill and seeing a massive legion of hobgoblins marching towards whatever their next target is. It gives me some major Pelennor Fields vibes. Hobgoblins are also known for training beasts, so while we're at Lord of the Rings references, if you want to see a great portrayal of what I imagine a hobgoblin to be, look no further than the warg riders from The Return of the King. That whole scene is an excellent example of a first encounter against some hobgoblins, maybe some forward scouts or something. Your players can then get a bit of intel if any of them are left alive, and likely hear about a large army headed their way. So obviously, there's a lot you can do here if you're trying to center an adventure around a hobgoblin legion. Things get infinitely more complicated when the monsters you need to defeat are an organized military. I think the first obvious form this would take is a siege. When you have a large army marching on a city, a siege is the logical byproduct. And if you've never played a siege encounter, they are fun. It gives you an amazing alternative win condition of protecting gates and keeping the monsters out of the city, and if you do manage to protect the city, then you have the opportunity to attack the enemy's camp. Which brings me to another option for this adventure, a sabotage mission. A Hobgoblin Legion works like a well-oiled machine, so it would be your job to sneak into their camp and break the gears that allow that machine to move. Sabotage missions are one of my favorite things to run and play in D&D, honestly, because it actually requires you to think about your actions, and if your DM is worth their salt, they'll apply plenty of pressure to make those choices quickly. And of course, as is the case with most stealth-related missions, things can fall apart at the drop of a hat, which, in my opinion, makes for some really fun D&D. The next monster I see used incorrectly so often is the Lich. The Lich is one of the most powerful undead in the game, and in my opinion, if run correctly, can be one of the most difficult opponents a party could face. Despite that, so often I see Liches just kind of being in a place where the party has an encounter and fighting the party and dying. Then the party finds the phylactery, hands it off to some powerful religious organization, and it is forgotten about and the party moves on. While that's fine, like I said before, it just so massively undersells the power and impact a Lich should have over the course of a campaign. There are a few reasons I think a Lich should be a super impactful character. Namely, they're wizards. Super ridiculously powerful wizards. I mean, the standard Lich stat block at the monster manual is an 18th level wizard. We're talking 9th level spells, several spells they can cast at will, the standard late game wizard stuff. Now tack that onto the fact that they can live forever, and if killed, they'll just come back unless you destroy their phylactery, which is likely hidden in some demiplane, because why would they keep it anywhere nearby? And you've got yourself a really, really scary bad guy. To me, an 18th level Lich is a fresh Lich. This is someone who just figured out how to become a Lich. Still strong, but basically just an undead 18th level wizard. The kind of Lich I want to run is a person who has lived 100 lifetimes and uncovered some of the darkest, most powerful magic in the world in that time. This is a Lich who has hundreds of servants, a ridiculously deadly lair laced with traps, enslaved monsters, and ancient treasures. A Lich can so easily become a campaign-ending boss because they take the dedication to arcana of a wizard and raise it to the nth level by studying it for multiple lifetimes. And of course, there's the classic trope of the whole dark side idea, where there are some abilities that are forbidden by what we'd call good-aligned people, but Liches don't care about all that, so they'll just break all the rules. An adventure centering around a Lich can take on a lot of different forms, but the biggest thing you have to take into account is the brutal, unforgiving intelligence of a several hundred-year-old wizard without morals. Your players will likely hear about a Lich long before they're ever prepared to fight them, requiring a good number of levels to not only get strong enough, but to also prepare for whatever the Lich has in store for them when they arrive. Odds are, a Lich has a grand scheme, which can be as simple as gaining more power and ascending to godhood, or as complex as creating armies to destroy entire realms one at a time, which means the characters would likely start pursuing this unknowingly at first. Perhaps there's a sudden surge of undead from a crypt, or rumors of a powerful artifact that has gone missing and the party has to investigate. A Lich is definitely a long-term boss because their plans don't move quickly. They've been developing their plot for hundreds of years, so the players may only see a small part of it and accidentally start pulling the threads which will lead to the main plot. This is what makes running a Lich adventure so satisfying, honestly, is watching the players slowly unravel pieces of information and put together exactly what is going on. And then, of course, there's the actual Lich encounter. This part is pretty simple. A Lich has collected the most powerful spells in existence. They have powerful scrolls, magic items, traps, and minions. They are absolutely merciless when fighting. Operating a Lich is not the time to go easy on your players. This is the time to be totally brutal and shoot to kill. Push them straight past death saves if possible. A Lich is incredibly intelligent and they know how adventurers fight, so you can use that knowledge to play the Lich accordingly. And the brilliant thing with the Lich is that once you kill them, they aren't really dead. So now you have the rest of the adventure, finding and destroying the Lich's phylactery before they come back. Now, this last part isn't entirely necessary because depending on the Lich, they may have their phylactery in a different world entirely and have no interest in returning to your world, but if you want a tense little denouement to the adventure, then that is a simple enough way to do it. The third monster is the ruler of the seas, the Leviathans of legend, the Kraken. Let me put this simply. In D&D, the Kraken is one step short of being a god. In fact, some are worshipped as deities and can grant powers much like a deity. In the lore, Krakens were used by the gods as warriors, but have since freed themselves from servitude. I've seen many times when a Kraken will just wildly come out of the water with no more warning than a few ominous waves after the party has easily slaughtered a small cult of fanatical fish people, and that is just so small for the impact a Kraken should have on a campaign. Here's the thing. Krakens can disrupt and destroy entire civilizations. One of the most terrifying sentences in the Monster Manual to describe Kraken says, "Land-born mortals who sail the open sea forget the reasons their ancestors dreaded the ocean, even as the races of the deep ignore strange gaps in their histories when their civilizations nearly vanished after the appearance of the tentacled horror." These things create gaps in history from the sheer destruction they can wreak. So when you have a Kraken pop up from underwater and randomly attack your party to never really be heard from again, you are seriously selling them short. Your party should start seeing ominous signs the moment they reach open ocean if there's a Kraken nearby. A darkening sky, storms in the distance, plenty of fish in the water, or alternatively no fish in the water. This should be something that makes your party consider just turning around, so really play into it. I love including legends for coastal cities as well. sail. As the party is about to set sail, they should hear rumblings of an angry sea god or something, a being powerful enough to single-handedly determine whether a harvest of fish is bountiful or barren. Perhaps that coastal city is suffering from an extremely slow season and are desperate to have a good harvest again, so the party sets out to investigate the happenings. In an actual encounter with a Kraken, it should rarely be found alone. This is a being so powerful that creatures will gladly throw their lives away to do its bidding. Cultists are a logical minion, as well as any water creatures that tend to be subjugated by powerful monsters. Take full advantage of the lair actions and legendary actions of the Kraken because they work very, very well together and really play up the power of this creature in all of your descriptions. If the ship your party sailed in on is still in one piece after the Kraken encounter, you did it wrong. Don't forget that they have the siege monster feature, which doubles the damage they deal to objects and structures, so that ship is toast the moment the Kraken gets its tentacles around it. The party is at a huge disadvantage fighting this creature in its lair, so I'd recommend giving them a sort of first taste encounter with the Kraken before they fully confront it. Maybe they see a ship get completely capsized in an instant from a distance and are able to turn tail and sail back to port. Give them time to get weapons that will work better underwater, armor that won't just make them sink immediately, maybe some magic stuff that will let them breathe underwater, that kind of stuff. Because going into a proper Kraken encounter unprepared should pretty much be a death sentence to any party that isn't super high level. Overall, let the legendary power of these creatures be put on full display over the course of this adventure. They are old, evil, pernicious, and very strong. Focus on making that very clear even before your players ever encounter one. The final creature on this list is kind of the Kraken of the land, the Tarasque. The simplest way I can describe the Tarasque is that it is a force of nature. It is an unaligned monstrosity, so it isn't running around looking for trouble or to save the day. This creature has a 3 intelligence, no smarter than your average beast, so it is literally just living its best life. It just also happens to be 50 feet tall, 70 feet long, and will get so hungry that it has to devour the whole population of an entire city. Long story short, you don't want to fight this thing, you have to. You don't know when or where the Tarasque will pop up, you just know that when it does, you either kill it or accept defeat and lose the entire city. And killing it would require some serious preparation. This thing has, on average, 676 health as well as 25 AC, immunity to non-magical damage, and this fun little thing called a reflective carapace, which I'll just read for you. Anytime the Tarasque is targeted by a magic missile spell, a line spell, or a spell that requires a ranged attack roll, roll a d6. On a 1 to 5, the Tarasque is unaffected. On a 6, the Tarasque is unaffected, and the effect is reflected back at the caster as though it originated from the Tarasque, turning the caster into the target. So basically, most ranged spells at best don't affect it. At worst, they will be sent right back at you. And that's not even mentioning the 5 attacks, frightful presence, and legendary actions. I mention all this just to say I understand why you'd want to just throw one of these at your party. That encounter is going to be wild no matter what. However, I think it would be a lot more fun if the first we hear of the Tarasque is an entire nearby city being completely demolished overnight. Very few survivors, if there even are any, report to the city that the party is in and tell of a monstrous titan creature that mowed through the city walls like it was a snow fort and devoured every single person they saw. The entire city guard, along with the strongest mages and whoever else was available, could barely even touch it, but despite all that madness, the creature is nowhere to be found. It crawled back into its lair and is now resting until it gets hungry again. Nobody knows where that lair is or when it will rise again, so now the party will always have that in the back of their minds. No matter what important questline they are pursuing, they will always be thinking about the inevitability of the next time the Tarasque attacks and potentially annihilates an entire city. Maybe the next time it rises, it just happens to be in the city they're in. Do they fight it, or do they run and watch the entire city get decimated while retreating? Or you can just toss one at the party and kill it and move on, but I think I know which one I prefer. Alright, those are the 4 monsters I have for today. I hope this has helped you all formulate some new ideas for your campaigns. Let me know in the comments below what monsters you think people are using wrong, because I would love to do another video like this in the future. But until then, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you around.